The 8th CELAC Summit was held in St Vincent and the Grenadines. Peace and regional integration were the central themes of discussion. Honduras assumed the pro tempore presidency of the bloc under the commitment to preserve peace in the region. The National Assembly of Venezuela delivered to the National Electoral Council the document with the dialogue agreement and the proposal for a 2024 electoral calendar. And the UN Special Rapporteur on Human Rights in the occupied Palestinian territories, Francesca Albanese, accused Israel of trying to starve the population of the Gaza Strip. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. In St Vincent and the Grenadines, the 8th Summit of the Community of Latin American and Caribbean States, CELAC, focused on peace and unity in the region. During the day, leaders of the 3 member countries of the organization ratified their commitments to fight against violence in order to guarantee a region of peace as part of the integration policy. The heads of state urged to be bold for the benefit of peace and the planet in the face of the effects of climate change, also affirming that if we want to change the economy, we must take into account the dynamics of conflicts, military powers, and support for bombs, as in the case of the imperial support to Israel to commit the murder of Palestinian civilians. During his speech at the CELAC Summit Conference, the Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro referred to the presidential electoral process to be held in Venezuela in 2024, criticized the West media for trying to discredit the elections, and called the regional bloc and the Secretary General of the United Nations to send observers to his country to supervise the whole process from beginning to end in order to testify to the world the transparency of the event and its strict observance of the Venezuelan Constitution and the rule of law.
So by asking the CELAC to evaluate the possibility to prepare a delegation to observe of international observers to join the process of preparation and realization of the presidential polls from this day to the day of elections.
In another part of his speech, President Maduro called the Latin American and Caribbean community to rise in support of the human rights in Palestine and questioned the capacity of the international justice to deal with the genocide being committed by Israel in that country.
So if a man is capable of letting fire himself up, we're not capable of rising Latin America and the Caribbean for the life, for the international right, for the human rights. Where is the International Court of Justice? Where are the organisms of justice in the international level? Or are they're not seeing, they're not hearing?
The President of Honduras, Xiomara Castro, emphasized that peace in Latin America and the Caribbean is based on respect for the principles of non-interference in the internal affairs of every state.
Peace in Latin America and the Caribbean must be based on respect for the principles of non-interference in the internal affairs of any state and the principles of national sovereignty, equal rights and self-determination of the peoples. We must foster friendship, cooperation and exchange among us.
The Honduran president said that conflicts in Latin America and the Caribbean must be resolved through dialogue and without violence.
To maintain our historic habit of being a zone free of armed conflict and warfare, today we must ratify our commitment that never a people of Latin America and the Caribbean will use violence against a brother country, and that the problems and differences of the countries of this bloc must be resolved among ourselves without interference or external pressures.
The President of Colombia, Gustavo Petro, highlighted the need for political, economic, and military peace in the region.
Peace in our region is political, economic, and military autonomy of Latin America and the Caribbean. And I finally refer to the military because it sounds naive to think that we're going to make a peace zone if we're aligning to the great blocs of military powers in the conflict for commercial reasons of business in the world.
The Colombian head of state said that the West's support for genocide in Palestine is a message to countries seeking to change the economic system.
It is not the old dynamic of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict that is being shown today. But in addition, and because of that, Germany supports genocide. France and the European Union and the United Kingdom, and above all the United States of America in its democratic version, supports dropping bombs on people because they are making a demonstration on the whole humanity. If we want to change the economy towards the decarbonized economy, nothing more, nothing less, they are telling us, look at our military power. What happens to Palestine can happen to any of you if you dare to make the changes without supervision.
Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, during his participation, urged member countries to practice solidarity to contain poverty and hunger.
We need solidarity for sustainable development. Sustainable development is objectives are slipping away. Millions of people in the region face poverty and hunger. You made a plan for food security and nutrition. But this requires financing, and many countries are still mired in debt. The global financial system has not yet provided long-term financing for countries in need. And you have not yet offered a financing network.
Guterres also called for the definition of an effective action plan to address the climate emergency experienced by island developing countries.
We need solidarity to address the climate emergency, which threatens the very existence of small island developing states. As extreme events strike with increasing ferocity, all countries must commit to making new nationally determined economy-wide contributions by 2025. The global climate change agenda should be aligned with limiting global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius. These plans should be used for both transition and investment.
During a press conference on Friday after the closing of CELAC summit, Prime Minister of St Vincent and the Grenadines, Ralph Gonsalves, referred to the bloc's decision to set up a permanent secretariat.
You see, to have continuity, CARICOM has a permanent secretariat. The European Union has a permanent secretariat. The OECS has a permanent secretariat. The Association of Caribbean States has a permanent secretariat. The Association of Caribbean States is not as powerful a body as CELAC, though it deals with 5 important subjects, the ACS that is, tourism, trade, transportation, and technology, plus disaster preparedness. CELAC has been addressing the issue of marine and air transportation. That is an ongoing problem, and we have to keep it on the agenda.
In another part of the press conference, Gonsalves talked about the need of integration and referred to the cooperation potentials in the pharmaceutical area.
Mexico and Brazil have developed a lot of pharmaceutical products. Cuba too. And you know, Cuba developed the vaccines, the Abdala, among others. But Cuba couldn't get its vaccine approved by any agency outside of Cuba. The Americans not approving it. The Europeans not approving it. The British not approving it. You have to wait on the World Health Organization, which is a longer process. And if you're not with the European agency, or the British, or the Americans, the CDC, Food and Drug Administration, and so on, you have a problem. Well, we have to do our own.
Let's take now a short break, but remember you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English. where you will find news in the different formats, news updates, and much more. All the stories coming up. Stay with us. Welcome back from the South. The National Assembly of Venezuela delivered to the National Electoral Council the document with the dialogue agreement and the proposal for the 2024 electoral calendar. The delivery of the document was headed by the President of the National Assembly, Jorge Rodriguez, and other members of the Legislative Board. The magistrates of the National Electoral Council were present. Rodriguez pointed out that the document transmits the will of the 53 participating political parties to respect the decisions issued by the National Electoral Council. At the same time, Rodriguez pointed out that during the dialogues, the idea of broadening the participation of all the political parties of the country was expressed.
In that process, we propose to expand, to make more inclusive what had already been initiated and which produced a document that has been called the Barbados Agreement. It is not and was not the first attempt to bring the parties closer to the factors to paint the field or to make a proposal so that the field would be painted and everyone would feel comfortable. Included and with sufficient guarantee to participate in the electoral events.
The President of the Venezuelan Parliament, Jorge Rodriguez, highlighted the participation of the main sectors of the South American country.
But now we have taken the call to the most inclusive level possible. Here are the signatures of the most important religious sectors of Venezuela, of businessmen and businesswomen, of peasants. Here are the signatures of 52 political parties that represent 84% of the popular vote. If we look at the result of the last election held in Venezuela in 2021, 84%. But it also corresponds to 97% of the total number of political parties duly accredited before the National Electoral Council.
In Brazil, the government proposed to the G20 the implementation of a global tax on super rich to promote sustainable development and reduce the high poverty rates. The proposal was presented by Brazil's Minister of Finance, Fernando Haddad, who stated that if all the nations of the world collaborated with each other, they could make a few individuals contribute positively to society. The minister previously instituted an investment fund tax on billionaires in Brazil, which allowed for a notable increase in tax collection, reaching $830 million in 1 year. The government of Luis Ignacio Lula Silva is currently leading the G20 until the end of 2024 and has proposed to focus the group on the issue of poverty and the struggle for a more equal society. In Haiti, at least 20 people were injured in a new day of violence perpetrated by various armed gangs that control different neighborhoods of Port-au-Prince. After Bahamian Prime Minister Philip Davis assured that Haiti's leader, Ariel Henry, had pledged to hold elections by August 31, 2025, heavily armed gangs reportedly wreaked havoc throughout Port-au-Prince. Shootings took place in and around the capital. A police station was raided by the gangs and schools sent their students home. The head of the G9 criminal group, ex-cop Jimmy Cherichier, announced that this is the beginning of an alleged revolution and that the gunmen are now in control. The United States Congress approved on Thursday a short-term budget to finance the federal government and avoid its partial shutdown. In the House of Representatives, the bill was approved with 320 votes in favor and 99 against, while on the Senate side, the initiative obtained 77 votes in favor and 13 against. The measure, known as the Continuing Resolution, postpones the funding of certain government departments until next Friday, March 8th, while at the same time postpones the deadline for the rest of the agencies until March 22nd. In this context, the Senate rejected both the attempts to add additional aid to Israel and the inclusion of the Border Security Bill, H.R. 2, passed by the Republican House. We have a final short break coming up, but before we invite you to join our WhatsApp community for our English-speaking audience, you can scan the QR code on screen to join directly and share the link to reach more people. Constant news coverage of Latin America and the Caribbean, as well as the rest of the world. Stay connected and informed with teleSUR. Final short break, don't go away. Welcome back from the South. On Friday, the UN Special Rapporteur on Human Rights in the occupied Palestinian territories, Francesca Albanese, accused Israel of trying to starve the population of the Gaza Strip. Her questioning comes against the backdrop of the massacre that took place Thursday in Gaza City, when Israeli soldiers fired on a crowd of citizens waiting for the arrival of vehicles loaded with food. According to official figures, at least 112 Palestinians were killed and 760 others were wounded. The UN official also criticized Western media coverage of the Israeli aggression against the coastal enclave, home to 2.3 million people. The Western media simply cannot report honestly on Gaza, she said on the same social media. The Israeli aggression against Gaza continues for the 147th consecutive day. Let's go with our correspondent in Gaza, Nur Harasin.
Day 147 here in the coastal enclave, and while things supposed to get better, however, the situation here on the ground is just getting worse. Talking about the highlights of the latest Israeli attacks on Gaza, more than 100 people were killed in an Israeli attack on a group of Palestinians that were waiting for humanitarian aid at the Al-Rashid Street. This action by Israel actually triggered the international community condemnation. There were protests all over the world, social media campaigns. Everyone is trying to show their support to the Palestinian people throughout condemning this act by Israel. It is not only an attack on Gaza, but it is an attack where a big number of Palestinians were killed while waiting for food for humanitarian aid. And talking also about the latest numbers coming from the Palestinian Health Ministry, more than 30,000 people were reported killed here in Gaza since the 7th of October. At the same time, and on the ground, the Israeli tanks continue shelling and shooting towards the eastern side of Al-Burej refugee camp, the Rafah, and also Khan Yunis. Nur Harazin, teleSUR, Gaza.
In Israel, hundreds of activists demonstrated in Tel Aviv to demand a permanent ceasefire and an end to the genocide against the Palestinian population in the Gaza Strip. The demonstration took place outside the Tel Aviv Cinematheque, where some 300 people showed up with placards displaying messages calling for an end to the genocide in Gaza. During the event, Jewish and Arab Israeli demonstrators, as well as authorities from charitable organizations and relatives of the Gaza victims, gave several speeches that were preceded by a minute of silence in honor of all those killed by the Israeli occupation army. The call, entitled "Only Peace Will Bring Security," was signed by 19 leftist organizations. The government of Nicaragua denounced the German state before the International Court of Justice for violating the Convention for the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide by sending military equipment to Israel. The text reads, "The Government of Reconciliation and National Unity informs the people of Nicaragua and the international community that they filed a lawsuit before the International Court of Justice against the Federal Republic of Germany for violations of the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, the 1949 Geneva Conventions and their additional protocols, the inalienable principles of international humanitarian law, and other imperative norms of international law." The text continues, "Germany has provided political, financial, and military support to Israel, knowing at the time of the authorization that the military equipment would be used to commit serious violations of international law. The German government has also cut off assistance to the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine refugees in the Near East, which is the main agency responsible for delivering aid to the occupied Palestinian territories. The statement reads, in view of this situation, on February 2nd, 2024, Nicaragua sent a verbal letter to Germany urging its government to immediately stop the supply of arms, ammunition, technology, and/or components to Israel and reminding it of its obligations under international law. Nicaragua also condemns Germany's decision to suspend funding to UNRWA. And it concludes the statement, Nicaragua takes this decision in accordance with its obligation under international law to guarantee respect for these fundamental international texts and customary international law. The Government of Reconciliation and National Unity reaffirms its commitment to the international rule of law and the peaceful settlement of disputes between states. Managua, March 1st, 2024. Like this, we have come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also join us on our social media on Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For Telesur English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thank you for watching.